All right, let's jump into another deep dive. This time we're going way back. We're talking ancient Chinese medicine.
Thousands of years back. Super interesting stuff.
We're looking at the Yellow Emperor's classic of internal medicine, specifically chapter 74, the spiritual pivot.
Yeah, this one is all about pulse diagnosis, figuring out what's going on inside the body just by feeling the pulse.
Okay, so no x-rays or blood tests, just a good old-fashioned feel of the wrist.
That was the main tool for a very long time.
You know, it's kind of hard to imagine not having all the tech we have now.
It really shows you how much observation mattered. They had to be super tuned in to those subtle clues.
So walk me through this. What were they looking for? Like, how did they actually diagnose someone just from their pulse?
So the key pulse is the one at the wrist, the Cunkou pulse.
Okay, right. The radial artery. I remember that from anatomy class.
But it wasn't just about finding the pulse.
Right. It wasn't just checking if they were alive.
Exactly. They were paying attention to the tension, how big or small it felt, even how smooth or rough it was.
So, like, almost like reading Braille, but on someone's wrist?
You could say that. It was all about those subtle qualities.
All right, I'm already feeling like I wouldn't have made a very good ancient physician.
Well, it takes practice.
What kind of things could they figure out from those pulse readings? Like, give me an example.
Let's say you felt a pulse that was slippery and moist.
Slippery and moist, okay.
That was a sign of a wind condition,
Hmm,
like an internal breeze messing with the body's balance.
I see. So it wasn't just about the pulse itself, but also how it felt, the qualities, right?
Exactly. And they'd use those qualities along with visual cues to get the full picture of someone's health.
Like what kind of visual cues?
So let's say you saw slightly swollen eyelids and some pulsating neck veins. Then you felt a weak pulse, really fragile.
Okay, I'm seeing a theme here.
Good.
Sounds like fluid.
That's right. That would point to wind-water edema, basically swelling from fluid being out of balance.
Got it.
Another example. Rough skin.
Yeah.
Like really rough, like dried fish scales. And then you feel a rough pulse too.
Okay, so roughness inside and out.
Exactly. That signals water stagnation, a buildup of fluids.
It's fascinating how much they could tell just from looking and feeling.
Yeah, it really highlights the power of observation, paying attention to the body's signals.
Makes you realize how much we rely on technology these days.
Definitely. But those subtle signs are still there.
It's true. Okay, so they looked at those visual cues, the qualities of the pulse. What else?
Well, they also took temperature into account.
Right, because if you're sick, you might feel feverish or chilled.
Exactly. They noticed those same sensations in the pulse.
So I'm guessing a really hot, bounding pulse would mean something different than a faint one with cold skin.
You got it. That hot pulse would suggest a raging fever, while the faint one could point to things like diarrhea or low energy. They called it key deficiency.
Okay, makes sense. Low energy, weak pulse.
And get this. They even paid attention to localized heat.
Localized heat.
Like if someone's elbows were warm, that could suggest a problem above the waist.
Interesting. So they were looking at the whole body for these clues, like an internal heat map or something.
Exactly.
This is wild. What else did they look at? I mean, what other kinds of things were they paying attention to?
You ready for this? They even used eye color as a diagnostic tool.
Wait, really? Eye color like the iris, the colored part?
Yep. They believed different eye colors corresponded to different organ systems. Like red eyes could signal heart issues, white eyes, lung problems. And a blue-green tint, that could mean something's up with the liver.
Wow, that's so interesting. My eyes are kind of hazel. What does that mean?
Well, this is just an intro, but it shows how they saw the body as a whole, the interconnected system.
Right, everything's connected.
And here's where it gets really interesting, even a bit creepy. They use patterns of red veins in the eyes to predict lifespan.
You're kidding.
Nope. Tiny veins extending towards the pupil. They thought those corresponded to the number of years a person had left. 1 vein, 1 year, and so on, up to 3.
Oh my goodness, that's both fascinating and terrifying. Can you imagine getting that news at the doctor's office?
I can't. But it speaks volumes about their in-depth understanding of the body's subtle language. Really looking for clues everywhere.
Absolutely. So they looked at the eyes, the pulse, the temperature, anything else.
They were really good at spotting subtle signs of jaundice,
Jaundice, okay.
like slight yellowing of the skin, teeth stains, a yellowish tinge to the nails, all pointing to an imbalance in the body. And they even identified pulse patterns that suggested a difficult recovery.
Like what kind of patterns?
For example, if the Cunkou pulse at the wrist and the Renang pulse in the neck, if those mirrored each other, that was considered a bad sign.
Wow, so they were paying attention to multiple pulse points. It's like they saw the whole body as this map. each landmark holding a special meaning?
That's a great way to put it.
This is all so fascinating. I feel like I need to be taking notes. But before we get too deep into all this ancient stuff, I have to ask, does any of this translate to modern medicine? Like, do doctors today still consider any of these subtle signs?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I think it's more relevant than ever. We've made huge strides with technology, but there's definitely a growing understanding that those subtle signs can still tell us a lot. I'm glad you asked about modern medicine and those subtle signs, because you're right, it's a really important point. Like, we've got all this amazing tech now, but I think more and more doctors are realizing those little details, they still matter.
Yeah, even with all our blood tests and scans and
Hey,
everything.
totally. Remember we were talking about the Cunkou pulse, the one at the wrist,
Yeah.
and all those qualities they were feeling for? Well, they actually had a whole system for how to interpret those little variations. It's almost like a secret language of the pulse.
A secret pulse language. Okay, now you've got me hooked. How did that work?
So get this. They described 28 different pulse qualities, each one associated with specific internal conditions. Some of the names were really interesting. Like, there was the floating pulse that felt very superficial, and the deep pulse that was barely there.
28. Wow, that's a lot to keep track of. Did they have names for all of them?
Lots of them, yeah. And the names really paint a picture of what they were feeling. You had the hurried pulse, racing like a galloping horse, and the slow pulse, dragging along like an ox pulling a cart. There was even a hollow pulse. They said it felt empty, like a bamboo stem.
Wow, that's incredible imagery. It's like they were trying to capture the essence of what they were feeling. But how did they actually use all those qualities to diagnose someone? Like, did they connect certain qualities to certain parts of the body?
They did. They'd categorize the pulses based on those qualities
Yeah.
and figure out if they were excess or deficient, yang or yin.
Okay, yin and yang. I've definitely heard those terms before, but I'm a little fuzzy on what they actually mean. Could you remind me?
Sure. It's a really fundamental concept in traditional Chinese medicine. Yin and yang, they represent those opposing forces in the universe, but forces that also complement each other.
Okay, like light and dark, hot and cold.
Exactly. Active and passive. And they believe that these forces are constantly interacting, influencing each other, and keeping them balanced was key to staying healthy.
I see. So how did they tie that to the pulse?
Well, they saw the pulse as a reflection of that balance. A yang pulse would be full, forceful, rapid, like heat and excess energy. But a yin pulse, that would be weak, thin, slow, pointing to cold or deficiency.
So by feeling the pulse, they could tell if the yin and yang were in harmony or if things were off.
Yeah, they could get a sense of the overall balance in the body. Pretty amazing, right?
It is. Did they connect those qualities to specific organs too?
Absolutely. For example, a floating pulse in the left hand, that was associated with the heart. But a floating pulse on the right, that was a lung thing. They mapped out all these connections for different pulse locations and different qualities. It's like a map of the body from the inside out.
Like a secret code for understanding what's happening inside? Could they also tell how serious an illness was by feeling the pulse? Like if it was going to be a quick recovery or something more long-term?
They definitely thought so.
Yeah.
They had a whole system for evaluating the strength of the pulse, the rhythm, the depth, and from there, they'd assess the severity of the illness and how it might progress. A strong, even pulse, that was a good sign. Showed vitality, you know. But a weak, irregular, or intermittent pulse, that was a red flag. Could mean a more serious condition.
So even those tiny details in the pulse could reveal a lot about someone's overall health. That's a totally different way of thinking about diagnosis than what we do now.
It is. They were looking for patterns and changes over time, not just those static markers of disease. It was way more dynamic, you know.
I see what you mean. It's more about the whole picture. And this is actually something I find really fascinating. Their approach to pulse diagnosis, it wasn't just technical, right? There's a whole philosophical side to it, too.
Right.
What's the philosophical side of feeling someone's pulse?
Well, think back to what we said about qi, that vital life force energy. They believed the pulse wasn't just a physical thing. It was a direct reflection of the qi flowing through the body.
Ah, so by feeling the pulse, they were actually tapping into that energy, seeing how strong it was, how balanced.
Exactly. That takes it beyond just a physical assessment, right? It becomes about understanding the connection between body, mind, and spirit, a much more holistic perspective.
That's really powerful. It makes you wonder if there's a way to bring that ancient wisdom together with our modern understanding of the body.
It's a great question. And actually, there are some interesting connections. For example, have you heard of pulse wave analysis?
Pulse wave analysis? I don't think so.
It's a newer field that's getting a lot of attention in cardiovascular health. It measures those tiny fluctuations in your blood pressure wave.
Okay.
And from that, doctors can learn about things like arterial stiffness, blood vessel health, even stress levels.
So we're using technology to look at some of the same things these ancient physicians were observing thousands of years ago.
In a way, yeah. It's kind of like we've come full circle. And it's not just pulse wave analysis. We're also seeing this resurgence of interest in practices like mindfulness and meditation.
Right. Those are all about being present in your body, noticing the subtle signals.
Exactly. And that's really what these ancient practitioners were all about. They were masters of observation, right? They understood that the body's always talking to us if we just slow down and listen.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. It's amazing how much they were able to figure out without all the fancy tools we have today. Makes you wonder if we've lost something along the way.
It's possible, but I think we're starting to rediscover the wisdom in those old traditions and finding new ways to connect them to modern healthcare. You know, the Yellow Emperor's Classic doesn't just talk about diagnosis. It also covers treatment methods. Maybe we should explore that next. What do you think?
Definitely. We've talked a lot about how they found imbalances in the body, but now I'm really curious to learn how they went about actually fixing them. What did they do to help people get better? I'm ready to hear about the treatments. We spent all this time talking about how they diagnosed illnesses, but how did they actually make people feel better? What did they deal?
So the main idea behind their treatment methods, it was all about restoring balance, harmony in the body.
Right, because they saw illness as like a disruption in the flow of ki.
That's it, that vital life force energy we talked about. So the goal of treatment was to get that energy flowing smoothly again.
So not attacking the disease head on, but creating the right conditions for the body to heal itself?
You got it. And to do that, they had a whole toolbox of techniques: acupuncture, herbal medicine, changing your diet, and exercises like Tai Chi and Qigong.
Those are all things people still do today, which is pretty amazing. It's like we're rediscovering this ancient wisdom. Let's break it down. What about acupuncture? How did that work?
Okay, so with acupuncture, you insert these super thin needles into very specific points on the body.
Along those energy pathways, the meridians.
Yes, exactly. And the idea is that stimulating those points helps to regulate the flow of qi. So you can alleviate pain, reduce inflammation, and just promote overall well-being.
You know, I've actually tried acupuncture for back pain, and it was surprisingly helpful.
It can be really effective.
It's pretty incredible how something so simple can have such a big impact. What did they use acupuncture for back then?
Oh, all sorts of things. Headaches and migraines, digestive issues, even emotional problems, believe it or not. It's really versatile.
Wow. What about herbal medicine? What kind of role did plants play in their healing practices?
Herbal medicine was huge, really essential. They knew so much about the healing power of plants, and they used them to create custom formulas for all kinds of different conditions.
So it wasn't just a matter of taking a pill. It was more like a carefully crafted blend of herbs designed to target a very specific imbalance.
Exactly. They consider the patient's individual symptoms, their constitution even, and even the time of year when making those herbal remedies. It was really tailored to each person.
It makes sense, a truly personalized approach. Did they give dietary advice as well?
Oh, absolutely. Food was medicine to them.
Yeah.
They really emphasized the importance of eating a healthy diet, whole, unprocessed foods, seasonal ingredients, focusing on things that would restore that balance in the body.
So no crazy crash diets or anything like that?
No, nothing extreme. It was more about understanding how different foods could affect your energy and then using them strategically. Like, they might recommend eating more warming foods to someone in a cold condition, for example, or cooling foods for someone with too much heat.
It's really about working with nature, not against it. Okay, so we've covered acupuncture, herbal medicine, diet. What about those exercises you mentioned? Tai Chi and Qigong, how did they fit in?
So Tai Chi and Qigong, they both involve slow, flowing movements, deep breathing, focusing your attention. And they saw these exercises as ways to actually cultivate qigis, improve your circulation, just enhance your overall well-being.
I've always been intrigued by Tai Chi. It just looks so graceful and peaceful. Did they prescribe these exercises for specific conditions, or was it more like a general health booster?
Well, they often use them along with other therapies like acupuncture and herbal medicine and dietary changes.
Yeah.
But yeah, the idea was that these practices could help people tap into their own inner vitality and create a sense of harmony between body, mind, and spirit.
It's amazing how all these practices work together. It's a very holistic view of health and well-being. You know, as we wrap up this deep dive, I can't help but be amazed by the Yellow Emperor's Classic of internal medicine. I mean, even though it's thousands of years old, it still feels so relevant today.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. It's packed with wisdom. These ancient practitioners, they understood the body's innate ability to heal itself. And that holistic approach to health is something we're just starting to rediscover in modern times.
It's a great reminder that good health is about so much more than just being disease-free. It's about cultivating that sense of vitality, being resilient, feeling connected to ourselves and the world around us.
And remembering that we have the power to heal. We're not just passive patients. We can actively participate in our own well-being.
This has been such an incredible journey, and honestly, I feel like we've just scratched the surface of this amazing text, but it's definitely made me want to learn more. Do you have any advice for our listeners who might be interested in exploring these ideas further?
I'd say just be open-minded and curious. Read more about traditional Chinese medicine. Maybe try a Tai Chi or Qigong class, or even talk to a practitioner in your area. The most important thing is to find what resonates with you and then see how you can incorporate those principles into your own life in a way that feels authentic and empowering.
It's all about listening to your body, paying attention to those subtle signs, and making choices that support your overall well-being.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive. Thank you so much for being our guide. I've learned so much from you today.
It's been my pleasure. And to everyone listening, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep. You never know what incredible insights you might discover.
Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of ancient Chinese medicine. Until next time, stay curious and be well.